another. Right, he says they differ essentially. So we'll see how much. Hermann Hoskier writes, he was another scholar, and he was a fairly impartial sort of scholar who said, I'll just sit down and I'll have a look at this. And he said, I have tabulated the major part of these differences between Aleph and B. Right? Aleph is Sinaiticus and B is Vaticanus. In the Gospels, just in the Gospels, and given the supported authorities on each side. So this is between Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. They're the two main manuscripts used by Westcott and Hort. Just in the Gospels, not the whole lot, just in the Gospels. They amount to differences. In Matthew, 656 differences. In Mark, 567. In Luke, 791. In John, 1022. For a total of 3,036 plus differences just in the Gospels between these two themselves. Right? There are more differences between these two manuscripts just in the Gospels than there are found between almost 5,000 manuscripts in the old majority text. Right? It's incredible. Bergen again. He says, between the first two, that's these two we're talking about, B and Aleph, there subsists an amount of sinister resemblance. He said there's something about them that makes you think they came from the same source, which proves that they must have been derived at no very remote period from the same very corrupt original. Tichenov, he's a bloke who discovered Vaticanus B, and he insists that they were partly written by the same scribe. Yet do they stand asunder in every page, as well as differ widely from the commonly received text, that's what we use, with which they have been carefully collated. Remember this, the scholars have sat down and said, let's look at these things and see what agreement there is and what differences. On being referred to this standard, right, comparing what Westcott and Hort had in B and Aleph, comparing this with the majority, which is the standard, and the majority text, in the Gospels alone. And this is the difference between what we use and what they use. B is found to admit at least 2,877 words. This is in the Gospels alone. This is not the whole New Testament, just in the Gospels. And Vaticanus B is found to leave out 2,877 words, to add 536, to substitute 935, to transpose 2,098, to modify 1,132, in all 7,578 changes. Now is that different? I ask you, when they say what they use and what we use, isn't that different? Is that different? 7,578 changes in the Gospels alone. And for Sinaiticus, Aleph, the corresponding figures are 3,455, 839, 1,114, 2,299, 1,265, in all 8,972. Now you say, boy oh boy, that's a lot of difference, and be it remembered that the omissions, additions, subtractions, transpositions and modifications are by no means the same in both, right? So you add them all together and there's a lot more differences. It is in fact, and this is what Bergen says, it is in fact easier to find two consecutive verses in which these two manuscripts differ or are different, one from the other, than two consecutive verses in which they entirely agree. Now, is that good internal evidence? I ask you. These are what we're told are the text with better credentials. Now, is that better credentials? all this disagreement with them and disagreement with the majority text, we are now beginning to understand this matter of variance. Right. To add to this, we must understand that with modern scanning devices, it has been discovered that the actual codices, Aleph and B, at Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, have themselves been modified and corrected extensively. We can look at them now with modern scanning devices and discover that they in themselves have been changed over and over. We actually now can go and get Aleph, right, Sinaiticus 1, Aleph 2, Aleph 3. We can get 3 copies of the one text, right? Now, that tells you something, doesn't it? It's been corrected so much we can get 3 copies of it. We also have B, that's Vaticanus, B1, B2 and B3 available to us. Aleph in particular has so many corrections and modifications that it's difficult for even the scholars to be sure of its original composition. Now, surely that tells us something about these documents themselves. They are very poor quality, they're not complete, they are not in internal agreement. The majority text far outweighs them in every possible way. But another assessment of the differences between the text used by Westcott and Hort and the majority text that we use for the King James is given us by Metzger. Now Metzger, those people who use the new versions would say Metzger is a fairly impartial. I think they would say that. He certainly isn't on our side of the argument. We would say he's against us. However, this is what he said. Vaticanus B agrees with the Textus Receptus only about 50% of the time. Right? Now this is a bloke who's not on our side of the argument, and he says it only agrees 50% of the time. So we're not arguing now about 3%, 15 words on every page. We're arguing about 50%. He says it differs from the majority text in nearly 8,000 places, amounting to 1 change per verse. Right? So that's what we're talking about. That's how different they are. Every verse. He says it omits several thousand keywords from the Gospels, nearly 1,000 complete sentences and 500 clauses. Right? It omits them, they're not even in it. Right. It adds approximately 500 words. It substitutes or modifies nearly 2,000 and transposes word order in about 2,000 places. Now get this next bit. It has nearly 600 readings that do not occur in any other manuscript. Right. These affect almost 1,000 words. Also note that Vaticanus B doesn't even have the books of Revelations, Philippians, Titus, and 1 and 2 Timothy. It also omits large portions of Samuel, Kings, Nehemiah, Psalms and Genesis. It also omits parts of Mark and Luke. Right, so they haven't got them. And then just let's look at Sinaiticus, Aleph, Tichanov's edition of the manuscripts enumerates some 14,800 places where some alteration has been made to the text. And I think we'll leave it there for this one and come back to there.